at the cow pasture spring of my freshman year. A close friend and I run through the field in bright-colored dresses with white and yellow flowers behind our ears. The cows wander around us, munching on grass, and the sun sets above us, spreading pinks and oranges across the sky behind the mountain range. It's like a scene out of a movie, or like a beautiful painting that would probably hang in the Clark. Buxton has a lot of these beautiful movie scene moments, probably because it's what I think one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And every person I meet here is like a character out of a book or a play. I guess what I'm getting at is, Buxton can feel very make-believe and very magical. Like hiking through the woods to get to a beautiful field with a view that'll take your breath away, where everything is bright green and little beetles and butterflies fly around. Or like when Buxton students would take over towns on Tuesdays and Saturdays, swimming in the river, biking to get ice cream, flooding in and out of stores. Or even just the moments walking down the path to your next class with all your friends, or any of the dance parties we've had. It's a feeling I could never put into words. Don't get me wrong, Buxton isn't always easy or magical. The complexity of life here is what makes it so great. The way things can get so hard and then so good again. That's what makes Buxton feel so make-believe. It's a strange place, one of the strangest places I've ever been, and I love it for that. But Buxton is real. It's a real place with real people in the real world. And just like living in the real world, things get complicated and ugly and scary. Here at Buxton, we aren't exempt from that. Remember that Buxton is so special because it is real. That all of the really special moments you feel here and all of the really dreadful ones are a result of Buxton being a place in the real world. I'm at the cow pastures again with my two favorite people. We're sweaty and each of us is out of breath because of how hard we are laughing. The feeling of the sun on our backs compares to drinking a warm cup of coffee on a cold winter morning. It feels like one of the most wholesome, joyous moments I've been in, and it's all extremely real. My feelings here at Buxton have never been make-believe. Whether it's the scary ones, or the joyous ones, or the painful ones, or the remarkable ones. Those feelings all existed in the real world.
I would like to briefly talk to you about sweet potatoes. Now, this is genuinely not a joke, but you can laugh if you want to. And this isn't one big metaphor for life either. This is just gonna be me talking about why I love sweet potatoes so much. I remember the first day I tried a sweet potato. I was 10 at a junior boarding school in upstate New York. I had spent the afternoon in the living room with my beloved house parents, and I think it was near the holidays at the time. At 10, I was hungry pretty much all of the time. And my house parents quickly understood their task of keeping me fed throughout the day, lest the world be exposed to a hungry, angry, bitter Eve. So on this fateful day, my house parent Evelyn put a sweet potato in the oven, and we waited by the fire until it finished baking. Back then, people assumed I was a picky eater. In reality, I was careful. I had never had this strange orange tuber before, but I trusted Evelyn and Dion, and in turn, trusted this mystery vegetable. Nowadays, the smell of sweet potato baking is soul comforting. Back then, on that brisk autumn day, the smell invoked a loving, warm, bright-eyed anticipation. It's the smell of waiting for something I knew would be delicious. Sure enough, with a little bit of butter and salt, I ate what would define the meaning of soul food for me. It spoke to me. It lulled me into its soft arms and cradled me from the inside out. Eating sweet potatoes is like being a baby again. A hot shower and baby powder on my back. Warm green tea with mostly milk and sugar in it. A warm bed next to my aquarium nightlight to rest my tired eyes on. It's like eating at a table with a family that will make sure you are too full to walk. It's good. It's a good thing, and that's significant. Every single thing around me right now is so complex and scary. I'm scared. I've become cognizant that I'm growing up, and it freaks me out. For some reason, eating sweet potatoes feels like being able to just say, I'm scared. Vulnerability, comfort, and security. I said this wouldn't be one big metaphor, and it's not. But it is meaningful to me. Something that provides long-lasting happiness is how I define my joy. And that's worth talking about. Joy is worth talking about. I know that at some point soon, on a warm summer day, I will take a moment to grab a sweet potato, scrub it well, poke some holes in it, bake it, salt it, butter it, and then eat it. And I know in that moment, it will be all right.
I spend a lot of time thinking about perception, the ways in which we experience and interact with the universe. Many people hold the basic assumption that perception is identical for everyone. And it makes sense that we'd think that, right? It's difficult to imagine ways in which someone could perceive life differently. But there are those of us who do. Everyone here has heard about the mind's eye. It's a pretty self-explanatory concept, but for a long time, something about it just didn't make sense to me. My first reckoning came in middle school, when the faculty tried to teach the students to meditate. We were instructed to close our eyes and imagine ourselves in a place that made us happy. Then, we were to describe it in detail. I did everything exactly as I was supposed to, but when I tried to describe my place, I was told to be more detailed. This confused me. I asked how I was supposed to remember the details, and I was told to just describe what I saw. But I didn't even know what that meant. I remember saying, out of frustration, all I see is orange, the inside of my eyelids. In late 2019, I found out that when most people imagine a place, they see it. I mean, I'd heard of visualization before, but I had always thought it was a metaphor. But no, for most people, the brain responds to imagination as it would to ocular stimuli. I, on the other hand, have aphantasia, meaning my brain does not do this. I literally cannot visualize. I have no mind's eye. But I don't find it limiting. I even prefer it this way, because the topics I study, the things I draw, the way I play music, none of it would be possible if my imagination depended on visualization. As it happens, my discovery of aphantasia coincided with a radical shift in self-confidence regarding my ADHD. For most of my life, I saw ADHD as a burden. I struggled with tasks that came easily to those around me, and so it seemed obvious to me that I was chronically bad at doing them. I became convinced that the only way to function in society, or even exist as a human, was to suppress my quote-unquote symptoms. But in late 2019, I started toying with the idea that ADHD was simply an alternative method of experiencing life. My discovery of aphantasia proved to me that these differences in perception weren't limiting, at least not until I was expected to be like everyone else. This revelation helped me accept myself for my differences, and led me to question other parts of myself that I had tailored to societal expectations, gender chief among these. For the longest time, I thought that the only way I'd ever accept myself was by suppressing fundamental aspects of my identity. The hypocrisy here is outstanding. Self-suppression is as far from self-acceptance as you can possibly get. But I was seriously at risk of losing parts of myself to that hypocrisy. I'm glad I didn't. I'm excited to be able to experience life as myself, now and in the future.
The standard template for a meal, appetizer, entree, etc., is rarely followed to a T, and I prefer to interpret how I see fit. I will share my interpretation of each course. Today, I will share my interpretation of each course and create a parallel course menu of memories I feel creates my Buxton experience. The appetizer for my Buxton experience I transferred here as a junior 3 years ago. When I got out of the car for the first time at the main house, I hadn't unloaded a single bag before Sadie and Nola ran down the ramp with an air of welcoming I hadn't experienced. We were bestowed Peacock with our first term room, and in the following years, coincidence showed its face time and again. At night, brushing my teeth, in would walk Nola, followed by Sadie a minute later. It would take seconds before one of us would utter a variation of Peacock for life. We had many of our accidental reunions until we left last year. Soup and salad hold a near identical status in a meal. While I don't usually base a meal off of either, I consider their impact on the other components. Unless I believe the salad dressing will serve as a piquant dipping sauce for the rest of my plate, eating my greens can wait. Similarly, a soup should be able to be a dipping sauce, a palate cleanser, or a pleasant contrast. However, both soup and salad may serve as a meal in themselves. Then my previous statements are rescinded. To clarify, I repeated my junior year. My first year here, my salad year, was permeated with events that inflicted the extremes of grief, sorrow, anger, and guilt. I was left hollow, unable to lift a symbolic finger to help myself, or rather stop everything from slipping. Glossing over a summer of decisions, reflection, and work, I returned to Buxton as a junior for my soup year. I had a large group of friends I loved immensely. I dove into ceramics, yielding nearly 40 pieces in a semester. I received the highest grades thus far in my life. That year had its tribulations, and the world was ultimately engulfed by one. Despite this, I continued to grow, to learn, to cultivate the roots of who I am. Entree, the main course. An entree is usually the premeditated part of my meal, what I've been craving, or what I saw earlier in the fridge. Everything else follows its lead, the sounding board for the meal, customarily the protein or the heartier component. The premeditated part, the core piece of my Buxton experience. I don't remember the first story or the first reunion, but my whole life I wanted to go to Buxton. It runs in my family, beginning in the 60s with a cousin who sent her son in the 80s, followed by my mother and her brother, an aunt and 2 more cousins. Fueled by my mother's stories, my dreams were infested with scenarios and plans for Buxton. It is a difficult wire to walk with so many different versions of one place playing in my head, while simultaneously creating my own version. My family's roots are the protein of my Buxton. Lastly, desserts are universally the favorite part of a meal. It can be as easy as unwrapping a chocolate or as intricate as tiramisu. You are left with the sweetest part of your meal lingering on your taste buds, negating any malcontent for the food you have finished. The dessert of my years here is the one place that I have spent more time than my room, the kitchen. I would go there no matter what I was feeling, whether I was distraught or ecstatic. It feels impossible to summarize its impact in a paragraph when it takes up such a large place in my heart. It is the cherry on top, the dusting of cocoa powder, it is the dollop of cream. I could not be more thankful to that space nor the people within it. It is the very last bite that I will savor for the rest of my life.
My decision to start drinking tea was a selfish one. My middle school teacher, John Stevens, often drank tea to curb his addiction to coffee. At the time, I thought that if I started drinking tea, it would bring out a higher sense of acknowledgement for a person I still think very highly of. But then I just started drinking it more. Now, one of my lifelong dreams is to open a cafe. When serving tea in courses, it would be detrimental to serve black tea first, since it has a much stronger taste and smell to most other teas. If you served a white tea after a black tea, the flavor of the white tea would be completely wasted. Tea should be served in this order: white, green, herbal, and then black. But beyond my future professional hopes, in some subtle ways, teas relate to the different relationships I have with the natural world and how that correlates with meaningful parts of my life. White tea comes in the form of my childhood: grass stalks between my toes, the frogs that Omama, my grandmother, would draw for me, the blurry vision when I run terrified away from bumblebees. Green tea is my life in school, the poison ivy I'd look at before boarding the bus, billowing hemlock trees while I search for good fire kindling with my classmates, the green rooftops of the art buildings. Herbal tea gives me a place to feel at home. Sunlit rocks beneath my feet. Animals abound in a crowded forest. The sensational feeling of laying in a bed of moss. The fresh smells pouring through an open window. The views from tops of cliffs and sights of murky ponds. But even though nature has meant so much to me, it doesn't mean I've walked away without any wounds. In some ways, it's quite ironic. The double-edged sword hidden just in a bush around the corner. Black tea, the tea that overshadows all the rest, is the thorny garden of my failure, my depression, and my persistent Lyme disease. I never got a bullseye or a fever. I didn't even see the tick that stopped my life in its tracks. Ever since 5th grade, it's been severe depression, memory loss, extreme fatigue, comprehension loss, pain, and the constant fear of the future. The worst part about all this is that I can remember being okay. I can remember coming to Buxton my freshman year. I attended almost all my classes. My homework was usually finished and turned in on time. I remember not having to ration my energy out for the day. I remember whenever I stayed over, I fell asleep at 12 and woke up at 7:30. I remember when it started going downhill all over again, and sometimes the only thing I'm feeling is despair. But sometimes there's more. John once told me the further you draw back the string on a bow, the further an arrow will fly. My bow was drawn back pretty far. But even if I never get off the ground, what I've experienced in my journey through misfortune has made me realize whenever I'm drinking tea on a chilly mountain, staring out onto vast lands full of the grandest things, I feel like I'm flying.
There's something about the sun that makes me really happy. Whenever it's cold, I think about the sun and I think about how much better things would be if it was warm. Sometimes on really hot days, though, I miss the cold. I guess the heat is the lesser of two evils. At least that's how I like to think of it. Getting to know people at Buxton is kind of similar to temperature. Coming to Buxton felt like a rush of warm air. Before I knew it, I was talking to people, making friends, and trying new things. But as I settled in further, there were times when the heat of Buxton got overwhelming. At times, the schedule, the responsibility, and even the relationships felt like the end of the world. Sometimes I retreated, trying to find a pocket of cold. I'd isolate myself because I thought it was the best decision. Luckily, those moments never lasted long. People would reach out to me, ask me to come to a birthday party, or play music in the practice room, and I would feel that warmth again. I feel really fortunate that people looked out for me, even when I was going through hard times. Even when I didn't want to talk to anyone and just fade into the background, they talked with me. The cold felt comfortable, like maybe I deserved it, but everyone reminded me of how nice the sun feels. Laying in the grass at the cow patties, sitting in the graveyard on a spring night. Even now, sometimes I still find myself in that cold headspace, and when I can't shake it, the warmth of the community snaps me out of it. I think I've learned to do the same for others in my own way. But I've also learned to take breaks when I need it, and cool off in a healthy way. It's okay to feel whatever emotions come because, like the weather, they will pass eventually. And they will come again. Even though it's hard, I try to take solace in the ebb and flow of daily thoughts and worries, because without the cold, maybe the warmth wouldn't feel as good.
Buxton, the place where I learned to believe in ghosts. I can't remember the first ghost story I heard here, but I can remember all of the ones I'd heard by the time I had my encounter. The Buxton lady, the little girl by the gatehouse, the butler, the man by the music building. As it spoke to me, I froze, and I did not move until it stopped. There was a voice behind my wall in the room called attic on the third floor of the main house. It was the spring of my freshman year. I see you, it said. I see all of you. The next day, I asked faculty what they knew about Buxton ghosts. Timothy chuckled to himself and asked if I was okay. Kathleen told me a story about seeing phantom hands in the kitchen early one morning. Uncharacteristically, Linda told me Mike St. Pierre once found a child-sized handprint in the storage closet that was behind the wall from where I had heard it. This hasn't been the only experience like this that I've had here, although it was definitely the most concrete. Other little things have happened over these past years that you could interpret as you want. Moments that left me with a shiver down my spine. A shuffling in the costume room, a deer that shared a gaze with me for nearly 5 minutes, a tall figure standing on top of the arts building hill that disappeared into the dark with a second glance. There's something about Buxton that seems to hold ghosts. Even Ellingear Sangster, the founder of Buxton, had a ghostly interaction in the main house. One summer, when she was going to put down a mortgage on the property, she was just about to sign the papers to do so when she heard from the deserted second and third floors the sound of all of the toilets flushing at once. She decided then not to sign the papers, interpreting it as her dead father warning her against it. Metaphorically, the ghosts here are ever present for me. They follow me with a persistence that is hard to shake. It's hard to look into a room without a flood of memories coming back to me. That's what Buxton does. It stitches you into its hills, paths, and rooms, its random rocks or trees. All of this haunts me sometimes. the ghosts of the people that I've lost my connection to, and the ghosts of different versions of Buxton that reset so often. The ghosts of all of our past selves, and the ghosts of the people that are really gone. When I heard that voice behind the wall, I was really terrified. The memory of it rang over and over in my head, and I was in a weird daze for weeks. Now the memory has softened, and it has become nothing but a fun story I tell to people in the dorm at night sometimes, a ghost story used to evoke fear. Sometimes I feel guilty when I tell it, as if I'm not honoring the ghost. But what does honoring a memory mean? A lengthy conversation I had my sophomore year on the Arts Building Hill is now a sentence. A dance at the theater from junior year has become a few freeze frames of faces. Honestly, I can't remember if Timothy truly asked me if I was okay that afternoon after I told him the story. Perhaps he just looked at me in a way that made me feel like that. And so these are our ghosts that haunt us, these memories with their flawed points, or that voice separated from whatever it once was, communicating a line that might have once held so much meaning. Did it come from a person, a feeling? I won't ever know, and it probably doesn't either. One last detail. As I heard that voice telling me that it saw me, I knew precisely what it meant. It didn't see all of me, Sadie, in particular, but all of us, the students who live here, who have lived here, and will live here. And while the experience of interacting with the ghost terrified me, the sentiment that it shared with me was oddly comforting, and it stayed with me as something that I often remind myself of. I feel that a lot of my time here has been spent trying to grasp these ghosts, what they are, what they were. Perhaps it is better to think of it as how they see us, as guests in their home for just 4 years. Sometimes we see them, we can never fully grasp them, and then we leave.
I'm leaving this Thursday to work in northern Nebraska on a wildlife refuge. I'm not so sure what I'll be doing there, just as I was not so sure what I'd be doing here. However, I hope to meet new people, gain new knowledge, and grow as an individual. I did not come to Buxton with these desires, yet this is what I got out of my time here. Of these 3 categories, it is the first I would like to focus on today. I have met a few people in my 2 years here who've left lasting impressions on me. These men and women are all immensely different, yet they all prized open my mind, corrected misconceptions, and broadened my worldview with each of their singular minds. It is important to note, however, that the discussions and arguments we had never took place in the classroom. They were held on walks in the woods, at midnight sitting on the floor, or in hushed voices with heads bent close. The thread which connects these friends is that during these conversations, they were able to express their inner thoughts which they did not feel welcome to discuss in the community at large. Whether this was truly the case or merely a misconception, it is a sentiment I felt almost immediately as well. It was only once I had established myself as someone with an open mind, willing to truly listen and reflect, that they became themselves in earnest. My first roommate, for example, kept conversation polite, school-related, and meaningless. Then, one day, after I had made it clear I was able to truly listen and express personal opinions, he became an entirely different person. From that point on, we spent hours every night discussing everything from Cantonese culture to the politics of rural America. Establishing oneself as honest and open are 2 of the most important qualities in all facets of life, but particularly in education. I would like to leave you with 5 suggestions that may lead to more honest dialogue. 1. Be sincere. 2. Do not seek to offend, but do not be meek. 3. Have the information to back up anything you present as fact. 4. Truly listen to what someone is saying. Be present with it. Do not prepare a response until you have heard them fully and had time to reflect. And 5. Search for those with radically different opinions. Now, this is not to say that I have learned nothing from my teachers. Every semester, Timothy has given me new insight into foreign cultures as well as my own. Dave and Stuart have fed my musical appetite and exposed me to the inner workings of the industry and the art. Kevin, Franny, and Ben have all introduced me to works of literature I would never have come across. Greg, Dana, Heather, Jared, Kristen, and Tom all kept me well fed in the head and the stomach. Yet, the central lesson I take away from the last 2 years is that some of the most impactful learning happens when you least expect it. You should always be ready to embrace these lessons whenever and wherever they come to you.
Before coming to Buxton, I'd always been patient about school years. In kindergarten, I want to graduate first grade so that I can be able to get my meal by myself from the cafeteria. In fifth grade, I wanted to graduate to middle school so that I could learn how to take public transportation and begin what I thought would be a basic teenage life. In Beacon, I wanted to graduate and start my independent. Now, graduating from Buxton, I want to be able to start my next journey in college and get back out in the world. Before coming to Buxton, I went about my usual routine of getting through my classes and getting my education. I didn't expect school to challenge me emotionally. That is, besides the common feeling of frustration, excitement, and fulfillment I get by working on schoolwork. I thought school would be the usual, the schoolwork, classroom friends, and at most a good 3 to 4 close friends to hang out with outside of school, which is how it was until I came to Buxton and started opening up. I realized everything was going to change for me as soon as I saw Buxton and how it made me like soccer, the woods, hiking, performing, and being heard. Every day at Buxton, there are new friendships and deep conversations I've had outside of a regular 8 to 3 school day. Rooted in those things were the people who made me feel open to exploring and made me feel safe to express my feelings. After losing my first soccer game, I thought everyone was going to be sad and upset at each other, but everyone celebrated and complimented each other as if we won the championship. It's times like those that make me want to step away, smile, and tap it in my memories for the days in which we needed to cheer up the most. Having everyone live so close to each other, you can't really hide your feelings or go on about your day with a false smile. I learned that to be a part of Buxton, you have to be open to being vulnerable and talk to friends and people so that you can heal, better yourself, and be able to have fun and be connected in the community. That can be in whatever form you want. For me, it was during Cozy Corner, where we would either talk in large closets of the main or some quiet, cozy space. There are also friend dates and paint and talk sessions. After many of these sessions and tears and hugs and everything else that went with them, I've been able to learn how important it was for me to slow down and create space for vulnerability and emotions, whether that is in school or outside of school. Now, I'm ready, not only with my educational skills, but my emotional ones as well.
I've done so many things at Buxton, but my mind rushes to my senior service meal, beef Wellington, which I made with my own hands. Every step that was taken was challenging and needed care. Beef Wellington is one of the hardest dishes to perfect in the culinary world, and I took on the task and dove head first into my version of this dish. Cutting into the beef Wellington, the rich aroma of the ingredients wafts through the kitchen. People slowly enter and their eyes widen at this work of art. After the dish is presented, people come back for seconds, even thirds. They all compliment me on this meal, and that brought a huge smile to my face. I realized that this is what I'm most proud of, cooking this meal for the whole school. Beef Wellington was my spark that led to a fiery passion for cooking. For many people, cooking is filled with stress and anxiety. For me, it's different. I let the worries of the day slip away and focus on the beef, butter, the onions. My sense of taste is heightened. I can taste every ingredient that is added to the dish. When prepping a dish or preparing, my mind knows what should go first and what should be last. I feel that the kitchen is my domain of power. I'm in control what happens there. I also love the freedom cooking offers. You don't have to follow the intended flow of the recipe. With all of its structure, cooking makes me feel free and wild. That's why I'm most passionate about cooking. It presents you with a map and a chance to explore. Cooking is an art form. Chefs strive to make a dish that only they can construct. It's called their specialty. I'm going to continue to explore this path of cooking and work towards becoming a master chef at the Culinary Institute of America. There I can focus on the beef, butter, and onions, and taste every ingredient in the dish. One day, I will make a dish that only I can create, and it will be my specialty.
Bedtime stories, books on tape during road trips with my cousins, children's hour at the library. Storytelling has weaved its way through my life. Events I live to tell the story of, people who've become parts of my story, stories of what my Grammy was like, or my Grandpa Robin, or my parents' first loves, or things my great-grandma did when she was young. Stories of her parents immigrating from Ukraine and the pieces of Judaism they carried on and what they left behind. Stories have a special way of opening a peephole into times, places, worlds, and people you've never witnessed or even imagined to be possible. They have a way of cautioning you to stay away or welcoming you in with warm arms and a cup of tea. I rediscovered my love for stories during the spring of 2020 in the depths of the first quarantine. I was in a dark place, the worst place I have ever been. I do not recommend visiting. Among the stories I began to curl up in was one that read, "Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing." It was an old, stained, and creased, crayon-scribbled copy of "Oh, the Places You'll Go" by Dr. Seuss that I picked up off our picture book shelf, not thinking much of it. The inside cover page read, "To my favorite graduate," a handwritten note to my mom from her grandma, a story passed down through generations, now finding me in a moment of need, telling me the words I didn't know I needed and never thought I would find in a children's book written by a racist man 30 years ago. Each of us are made up of stories compiled through time, passed down through generations, pieces of places and people you picked up here and there. Sometimes pieces that stick, like gum to a shoe, can have a negative effect too. They can keep a firm grip, but only you can decide who you're going to be. So let go of the things that are holding you back. Pull off the burrs that gathered at your socks, and release the notions that do not serve you. I know it's easier said than done, but whomever you become, remember to be kind to yourself and others and even bugs, and remember that you are loved. Congratulations. I can't wait to see all the places we go.
My first week at Buxton, I lied to my friend Brandon. He asked me if I was a drummer, and I said yes. I played jazz with my friends all the time. At the time, I couldn't tap a pencil in tempo for more than half a second before skipping a beat. I did, however, long to play an instrument, and was obsessed with drum breaks and crash cymbals. I loved the controlled chaos of a break and the way the beat seamlessly tied itself back together and resolved. As soon as the lie left my mouth, I knew that I had to get to work. As Brandon and I left the arts building, I asked if we knew where the drums were and if I could use them. He pointed crookedly across the arts building hill towards a tiny little shack tucked away behind some bushes and trees. Luckily, he didn't come with me, but unluckily, I didn't find it. The next day, Kaj, a freshman whose hair completely covered his face, escorted me to the practice room. He saw I had no clue what I was doing and was kind enough to give me a quick tutorial.
I picked up the sticks and put my feet on the hi-hat and kick drum pedals. I immediately became aware of how difficult drumming was. Kaj told me to count in my head constantly while reciting boom, tick, tick, snare, tick, tick, boom, tick, tick, snare, and so on. I sat there for about an hour by myself, repeating the most brain-numbing drum beat imaginable before I got the hang of it. At some point, Brandon and I got together. Brandon was a bass player who wanted to play the guitar, and I was an exceedingly bad drummer. We shot riffs back and forth together every few days, and somehow he never realized I had no training whatsoever. Emerson, the other frequent practice room user, quickly inserted themselves into our strange band, bringing with them huge speakers and a pedal board. Slowly, we started forming a sound that Brandon and I fell in love with. I soon forgot I didn't know how to play the drums and started believing my lie. From that point forward, I visited this room every moment I got, always practicing new fills or trying to improve my tempo. I started playing drums in my dreams and woke the next day able to play the song I had dreamt of. Slowly, more people began to come to the practice room. JW added his guitar playing to the mix, and Sophia brought a keyboard. As we made and recorded more songs, I was able to achieve more things on the drums. By the end of the year, I had successfully picked up the drums. I smiled to myself in secret, knowing that no one had seen through my fraud and that Brandon hadn't been hurt by it. Thinking back, I don't fully understand why I even lied in the first place. Brandon probably would have still played music with me if he knew I wasn't new to the drums. I don't think I lied to deceive and impress Brandon, or to make myself look like a cool jazz musician. I think I lied to myself. I think I lied for myself so that I could force myself to become who I wanted to be. As Brandon and Emerson slowly trickled out of my musical life, I couldn't help but celebrate this fortuitous lie and all the amazing memories that grew out of it.
Sometimes I think I'm an idiot, bound to do something stupid that ruined mine and everyone else's life. Then I remember Christopher Columbus, who thought America was India, screwed over an entire race of people, and had relations with a manatee thinking that they were mermaids. I won't even tell you about the llamas. So I can find peace in the fact that at least I'm not that much of an idiot. Sometimes I feel like I'm not a good person, that I should be more like someone else. Then I remember Gandhi, who was no Gandhi. Mother Teresa was a walking human rights violation, and God was probably one of the least forgiving people in the Bible, and a huge narcissist. The people who everyone tells you to worship and be like don't really exist the way you thought. Everyone has a different set of morals and ethics, and you just have to choose and question yours, and hold yourself accountable for the person that you become. Sometimes I think it's funny how people think they're important when nobody will know their name in 3 generations. There are so many versions of the perfect world or the perfect person to strive to be that it's nauseatingly impossible. The world wants to change people's individuality to fit its needs, and even Buxton at times can feel like it's waving the treat of the ideal Buxton student in front of your face. If there's one thing I've learned, is that you have to push society's boundaries to find yourself, but you have to stay true to yourself while you do it, and go at your own pace. The world's view of perfect is stressful and exclusive, and I know that I don't want to conform to other people's standards, but I also now know not to push my standards on other people, because it will do more harm than good. This entire world is so screwed up in so many different ways. The past 4 years, not just for me, but in America, have been very stressful and a struggle. But thankfully, I've had the support and spirit of Buxton to help get me through it and understand it. Even the times where Buxton feels against you, you learn from it and grow to understand something you didn't before. I'm I'm not saying that you shouldn't have goals or expectations for yourself, but they should be your goals and your expectations. And you have to put in the effort to make them come true.
Fact that you once lived and breathed on this hugely complex planet in a universe made up so entirely of dark grains of lifeless rock. You lived. Isn't that amazing in it? Itself. You don't need to be extraordinary or beautiful or happy or in love, and you don't have to repent or suffer for those things either. It's enough to exist. Kurt Vonnegut once said, "I tell you, we are here on earth to fart around, and don't let anyone tell you any different."
Hanging over the kitchen sink at my house, there's a long painted wooden sign that reads,
Houses are made of bricks and beams, homes are made of love and dreams. And whereas that's incredibly cheesy, sorry, Mom, it always made me think about what home really means to me. Growing up, hating school, I would have never thought it'd be possible for a school to be my home. It's hard to put into words what really makes something a home or why Buxton feels so much like home. So instead, I'd like to share 6 randomly selected memories from the past few years. 1. My very first day, I was super anxious despite a very lovely welcome. I was freaking out, so when we went to get my stuff from the car, I threw up behind a tree next to the parking lot in front of 2 returning students who were just trying to help me move in. They never told anyone about it and took me on a walk in town to calm me down. 2. One day, I was on the recycling crew for work program with a senior driving the truck, and we found an old Nerf gun in the bin. We spent the whole time going into every building, yelling, pretending that we were taking the recycling hostage, then fleeing our crime scene by jumping into the moving truck through the windows. People in the buildings played along like we were holding them at gunpoint and robbing them. Students are no longer allowed to drive the truck for recycling. 3. After a spring arts performance, I left my flute case in the mudroom for a few days. When I opened it, there was a small note saying, "The flute is a dumb instrument." I still keep it in there to this day, and it makes me chuckle every time I go to play. 4. One time, I was having a mysterious allergic reaction on my hands, so I had to take a Benadryl in the middle of the day. I then fell asleep on the floor in the main house, in Lindsay's office, with people walking in and out, attending to their business. No one bothered me or tried to move me. They just let me sleep peacefully. Apparently, I was snoring. 5. I got mistaken for a faculty member for 2 whole months by a freshman. I'm not going to elaborate on this one, just wow. 6. I had spent all this year joking about digging the Buxton Pit. It's a pit in the ground where you can go when you are sad or you want to be one with the earth. One Saturday evening, I was bored and I decided to follow through with my joke. I stood up, announced, "It's time to dig the Buxton Pit," and walked out of the room without further explanation. Multiple people followed me, without question, to get shovels. We spent many nights a week singing songs and slinging dirt in the dark. Now, I don't know if it's memories like these, or the beautiful campus, or the love and dreams that make this place my home, or if it's just something beyond explanation. Sometimes things aren't meant to be dissected. As I'm leaving this place, I've been really appreciating the Irish goodbye.
When I was a kid, I would imagine moving across the country to California, where I could live out my high school musical-esque dreams of partying on the beach. When I was in 6th grade, I'd imagine moving to a new school in the city, where every embarrassing moment I'd had in front of my peers would be wiped away by the power of anonymity. That year, my mom's job moved their offices away from Albany, and I was almost a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to make the move to Raleigh, North Carolina. All through my 4 years of high school, I helped myself through hard times with my fantasy of finally going to college and getting to live in a real city that wasn't North Adams or Pittsfield. When I was looking at schools, I wanted a minimum of 3 hours away. And then I was, or more accurately, I am, actually leaving. It became a certainty, not an idea too far off in the distance and foggy to grasp at. I won't say I'm not excited to have a new experience next year in DC, because I definitely am, but it made me slow down. It made me stop and notice how beautiful the view is from the top of the Arts Building hill at night with just the dark mountains, sparse lights, and warm summer air. I realized how intimately my feelings become connected to the weather when I'm outside every day, both at Buxton and during my long walks around town during the worst months of the pandemic. I gained a new appreciation for all the shops on Spring Street and the 3 local restaurants I've probably eaten at hundreds of times. I became more interested in town politics, and I voted in a local election. As I go off to college, I'm glad to be from Berkshire County and to call this beautiful place with a valuable life and character of its own my hometown. I don't want to be taken as saying to not look towards the future. My goals and my aspirations are valuable, and they've helped me make it through all the times that I've struggled in the present. But also, sometimes it's important to stop and take a look around. Thank you.
I used to not want to be a reflection. When I look in the mirror, I see parts of my mother. I have her eyes and her jaw, and I used to have her hair, all bobbed and sleek black, before I shaved it off. I'm not sure how to talk about her here, but I want to try, because so much of who I am is twisted up with her, both the way she was and the way she left. Around the time when I was pulling away from home, pulling away from everything that reminded me of her, I started to feel scared when I saw her face looking back at me, if only for a second, in puddles and in nighttime windows. Sometimes I feel like all I am is the space she left behind. I began to notice the parts of her that I'd absorbed without realizing, little ways that I reflected her. And all the while, she was becoming more and more unrecognizable. I felt like little bits of me were disappearing along with her. And then I came here, and I learned how to hold parts of other people and call them my own. I've realized that the best parts of me are reflections of other people I look up to, maybe warped a bit, but still familiar. They're developed through sitting elbow to elbow with each other at meals, surrounded by objects that people have poured their hearts into, ceramics and paintings and anything else. And this familiarity that I've found here, this comfort in trying on different personalities, has helped me feel safe in mirroring the people around me. But I still don't know how I feel about the ways in which I mirror my mother, even though she's one of the people that I love the most. And she was so filled with love for me. When I was little, so much of how I saw her was made up of how much she loved me. And even when she was so far gone that I almost couldn't recognize her, gone in a way that made me realize that my fear and anger, as well as my love, was reflected in her, I could still see the love she held for me. But I still can't erase that unease that I feel when I look in the mirror. I don't know when that feeling will go away, but I've learned that sometimes there is a sense of ownership to be gained in being vulnerable. Maybe that's why I wanted to wear the clothes that remind me most of her today. Sometimes the strange feeling is all I have left of her. I've learned so much from reflecting the people around me, and even though I can't help feeling like a ghost, mirroring someone who is no longer here, I want to try, because I want to grow up loving as fiercely as she did.
I had a dream recently of a tree, or more like an image of a tree. It was full and tall and seemed very old and wise. I could tell it carried a lot of knowledge and was standing in a completely empty space. When I woke up, I got the intense feeling it was an oak tree. I wasn't sure why I dreamed of an oak tree, but it stuck with me for a while. I couldn't stop thinking of it, so I did some research. When I looked into it, I realized why I dreamed of this tree. The mighty oak is a symbol of strength, morale, resistance, and knowledge. The oak is a reflection of what I've gained from my time at Buxton. When I first arrived my sophomore year at Buxton, I didn't realize what stage of life I was in. I didn't know how much more I had to learn and go through to know myself. At that point in time, I was uneven, up in the clouds, floating around, not knowing the right direction I needed to be heading. And looking back, I found myself attracting similar people. We were all in the same unstable state in our own insecure ways. It wasn't clear to me how debilitating it can be to surround yourself with disordered mirrors. I don't remember what caused my shift of direction, and perhaps the process was never in my control. But slowly and surely, I began to rise, growing gradually at my own rate, like a tree that bends towards the light. I planted my roots and began to stand taller, no longer weightless, untroubled by the winds, receiving support from my loved ones while strengthening my own independence. They say the oak tree's noble presence and nurturing habit reassured ancient people that they could prevail against all odds. I hope the strength I've developed can uphold the people I love, and that, like the mighty oak, I can remain balanced in times of need.
Life is strange. The last year, especially so. A lot of things happened, but let me give you the 3-minute version. First, everyone at our school had to go home in the middle of my junior year, and then I needed to stay there for 1, 2, 15-ish months. It could have been longer, I'm not sure. Time starts to blend together after a while. Now, I know we were all stuck in our homes for quite a bit of time, but after doing a little math, I think I can say I was quarantined the longest. I'm a pretty big homebody, so the thought of being in my room for an extended period of time didn't seem that bad till month 4 rolled around. The novelty of Zoom had worn off after about a week, and I could have sworn that my internet provider was conspiring to keep me out of classes. My signal would cut out right before class or even right in the middle. I promise, John, that's what happened. Online classes were a struggle, and I'm happy they're over. I didn't realize how much I valued looking someone in their face till I literally couldn't. It was hard trying to find ways to keep up with peers that I didn't see and to be there for them when they needed me. To be frank, it felt like playing a game I couldn't win. In fact, it's interesting to me just how similar my experience in the pandemic was to a game, a survival horror to be exact. Civilization collapses, there are a few survivors fighting back, and swarms of zombies. So many zombies. Survival horror games are all about taking control away from the player, leaving them on edge and having them feel as vulnerable as possible. I hate to admit it, but that's how it felt for the months I was cooped up. I had no idea what was coming next, and every day that passed chipped away at the faith that I had that this will be over before you know it. It sucked. People I knew got sick. Even my grandmother passed. Though I know she's still with me, and no, not as a zombie. Also, I had only one person to really talk to, my mom. Hi, Mom. For y'all that don't get that, imagine chemistry never ends, and you could be called on at any time, all the time, for the length of 39,420,000 seconds. Did I do the math to figure that out? Yes. Is David impressed? He looks impressed. In those 657,000 minutes, I had a lot of time to think. Like, when people put dogs in little outfits, aren't they literally putting a wolf in sheep's clothing? Or how do people on social media not have a problem with thousands or even millions of people staring at everything they do and either trying to imitate it or tear it apart? That freaks me out. Bro, my mind is weird. But you know what else is weird? The future. Every person here's journey isn't over, and our paths may cross again. But the time we spent together and the impact it's had on us can never be replicated or forgotten. We were together, then we were apart. Now we're back together, and tomorrow we'll be apart, which must mean that one day we'll be together again.
My heart and stomach know what I'm thinking before I do, and they want me to say goodbye, to pay my dues, to lament. But to grieve something I still have is to waste hours. To give that time to grief, who's notoriously greedy and not all that reasonable, is to relinquish the days I have left and deliver them into the hands of a ghost. I took off my shoes and I pressed my toes into the grass, and I learned that I can cry and laugh at the same time, and it feels better than either one by itself. Time can feel like an enemy when you're not ready to let go, or when you can see the shadow of the past. And it's true, time can be cunning. Some days I've cursed the passing of minutes, how time seems to thieve opportunities and moments and people, but time gives just as much as it takes. Without the hands of a clock held in my own, I would have never had a reason to condemn time in the first place. It's hard to learn lessons by reading between the lines of despondency, but I'd rather know something worth grieving than to never know grief at all. And I know now that to grieve each passing hour is to waste the next.
Love strikes in an instant, at first when you're a kid. Something suddenly seems so appealing and attractive that those feelings overwhelm your own ability to understand them. It happened the first time I really listened to a song. It was an Adele song, probably Someone Like You, except that romantic love had not yet reached my consciousness, so I thought of my grandmother. All of a sudden, my feelings of grief were shared secret words that sounded pretty to me. It happened while I was watching Nova Science Now. The fatherly voice of Neil deGrasse Tyson explained with complete clarity and certainty how our universe began, how we came from a tiny little point in space that blew up into everything we know and everything we don't, how we are just a tiny coincidence inside of this giant explosion. I nearly choked on my Cheerios as everything seemed to fall into place. If we could know something so profound, there would surely be an answer for every question. And so I began asking and asking until I figured out that science had its limitations. It happened when I was sitting in class behind Lou, and I noticed for the first time how pretty his hair was. Golden ringlets, like my favorite doll's hair, and how his long fingernails made satisfying noises as he tapped them on his desk, and how his body odor could smell almost like oranges if I really concentrated. I noticed him whenever he was in a room, until I saw him picking his nose so intensely that he disgusted me, and it was gone. There is plenty to fall in love with around here. The satisfying smell of earth in the shower after I've been toiling away at weeds. Somnolent evening walks down the strip of path that remains unlit. The apprehension of stepping on a worm, the strange satisfaction once I've done so. Pockets of air which lay dormant under the path until they seem to rise to the surface on rainy days and have a spongy feeling when you walk over them. The boundlessness of an open field where the sky reaches the edges of my sight and arches over and around me like a grand dome. Does this act of falling in love inevitably end in cuts and fractures? Heartbreak is easy, perhaps natural. Most things that we idolize or idealize are inevitably subject to the scrutiny of the mind. When these positions of esteem become empty, we feel lost. Optimism lies in the past, recent enough to mourn, but too distant to call upon. My separation from this school has not been nearly as tumultuous or abrupt as I expected it to be. It has been a slow drifting apart, a losing of touch, as I begin to shift my love for Buxton, which comes from my individual experiences here, to a more objective appreciation of the space itself. When I look carefully, I can still find parts of this school that have remained untouched for decades. Just last week, I stumbled upon a solitary chair in the middle of the woods, rotting and covered with moss so that it seemed to have emerged naturally from the earth. This chair seemed to bear some great distant significance, which I could appreciate but not understand. Despite its impermanence in my own life, I can find solace in the permanence of this place, in how it fossilizes experiences and leaves them untouched and uncorrupted.
Not that long ago, this group of students and I read Sonny's Blues together. In this James Baldwin short story, we meet Sonny and his unnamed brother, two men whose lives took divergent turns, one successful, one always struggling, one a father, one a loner, one a teacher, one a musician. The story is about many things: family, legacy, misfortune, the past that haunts us, the present that just might heal us. And it is constantly pairing the brothers, twinning them and contrasting them. Most of all, it is a story about pain and healing and the transformative power of art. For the past 2 weeks, as these seniors wrote and polished these speeches, I kept thinking about Sonny's Blues. Partly, this is because this class really loved that story and we had great discussions about it. And that is a cherished memory I have of this group. But also because these speeches kept echoing so many of the ideas and themes Baldwin weaves into his work. These speeches are full of the same kinds of twins and dichotomies, the savory and the sweet that makes a complete meal or a signature dish, the make-believe and reality that we live in here at Buxton, the ghosts that both haunt and enrich us. How can a sweet potato both comfort us and make us brave? How is it that nature can heal us and also bite us back? How can school be both school and life? How can life be both mediocre and extraordinary? How can young people, just beginning their so-called real lives, tell us so much about what it means to live? John Dewey, the educational philosopher who inspired Buxton's founder and its founding, felt that the rich lived experience of young people should be at the center of their education. Actually, let's go further than that. That experience is education. That notion is at the heart of what we do here at Buxton, and it only works if you truly believe that young people have rich inner lives, that their experience counts, and that they are already capable of wisdom, even at this young age. Can anyone hearing these speeches not agree? Could anyone listening to these brave young people who are willing to stand up on a day like today and talk about pain as much as they talk about joy, to acknowledge sorrow right alongside happiness, to already know as deeply as it can be known that loss lives right next door to love? Could anyone argue that they don't already know what life is about, what it is for, and what it holds for them? To know at 18 that it is possible to laugh and cry at the same time and that it's actually better that way is to know as much as any high school graduate can hope to know. And it reminds the rest of us along the way to live deeply, to love fiercely, to claim home in whatever cozy corner, ramshackle practice room, or communally dug pit you can find. At the end of Sonny's Blues, Sonny's brother hears Sonny play jazz for the first time. He is transported by the music, and his whole view of Sonny expands. He begins to see that Sonny's pain, Sonny's screw-ups, and Sonny's tentative hold on sobriety and life are part of Sonny's music, that the blues aren't possible without pain and loss. And yet the act of transforming the hard stuff of life into music, into art, into beauty, he realizes, is the act, the art of living fully. That's what these speeches are saying and doing with their eloquence and honesty. That the warm can't exist without the cold, that us being together inevitably carries the specter of us being apart, that the kernel of early love also carries the seeds of heartbreak. And yet, connection is possible. Self-knowledge and acceptance are possible. Healing is possible. Through stories, through cooking, through music, through poetry, through friendship, through love, we grow roots, we grow strong, our cup runs over, and we've walked forward into the future in full appreciation of the past that brought us here.
Christopher Kingsley Anthony Walker West.